So, funnily enough, actually, I remember in 2006 presenting slides with the word revolution on them, when we had pension simplification, which has proven anything but simple. But in reality, I think this time around, what's the best word to describe it? I know a client said to me a few weeks ago, pensions have suddenly become sexy again, which probably shows that he needs to get out a bit more. But at the same time, I know exactly what he's saying, because whereas pensions have traditionally been viewed as being quite obstructive in terms of access, as a result of the Chancellor's changes, which he's announced over the past 9 or 10 months or so, pensions have suddenly become an absolutely super tax efficient way of not only putting money in, but if you do it right, of taking money out as well. And in fact, for many people, I think their pension funds, if they are used correctly, will become integral to their inheritance tax planning as much as anything else. So that's what we've got today. There's quite a lot there. And anyone that's been to my presentations before will know that they can be a little bit technical. So if there's anything you don't understand, just make a note of the slide or the subject and just grab me afterwards and I can go through it with you. Okay. So we have got a few months left before the new pension world hits us. The new rules that George Osborne has announced definitely give lots more choice. We are talking about a wildly more advantageous tax regime, and as a result we are talking about fabulous planning opportunities, particularly perhaps for those people that are a little bit closer to retirement. When the announcements were first made in last year's budget, we predicted that people would want to reconnect with pensions, and we have seen that firsthand. We've seen more and more clients wanting to talk about their accumulated pension funds, and dare I say it, more and more clients want to reaccumulate and put more money in. So, first of all, the background. About a year ago, I did a director's question time with about 200 or 300 delegates. And I think my colleagues sitting in the room would agree that I got absolutely roasted. And the reason I got roasted is because people made it fairly clear to me that they absolutely loathed annuities. And I think it's true to say that despite trying to put up a good effort, I'm afraid I got absolutely destroyed on this. And in many respects, the review and the work undertaken by the Financial Conduct Authority kind of crystallised what many people had already been saying to us for years, and that is basically that annuities seem to represent poor value. I would suggest that's probably a sanitisation, because a lot of people just call them a barefaced rip-off. For the life offices and the annuity suppliers, they have been fighting for a number of years against very low gilt yields and the fact that we are living longer, and as a result, income paid from annuities has got worse and worse. Now, this young gentleman here, this handsome young chap that you can see on the slide, that is me 20 years ago, when I had more hair, but scarily I was actually bigger than I am now by the look of it. In 1994, a male of 65 who wanted to annuitise, in this example he had a fund of £10,000. Anyone like to hazard a guess at what sort of income they could get for that £10,000? 6%? 7%? Believe it or not, try 11.4%. If we roll the clock forward to today, that same £10,000 will buy you 560 in income, which is a significantly lower conversion factor. So the reasons for change, I think, were fairly apparent. I guess what shocked everybody was what happened last year. So, the budget that went to Parliament, it must be the first one in 20 odd years of my professional career that I missed, and it was probably the most important out of all of them, because basically George Osborne took 100 years worth of pension rules and he said we're going to tear them up. And not only did he say we're going to tear them up, but when the detail came out, he really meant it. Because from April of this year, there will be no restrictions on people that want to draw money out of their pension, provided they have reached age 55. So in theory, if you've got a personal pension, a stakeholder pension, a retirement annuity going back to the 1980s, a freestanding AVC, in fact any type of money purchase pot, you can take all the money out in one go if you want. You can take it out in 2 or 3 slugs over the next few years. And perhaps most importantly, and when we go through the planning aspects of this, you drive the process, not the revenue and not the legislation. Yeah. If you choose to draw the money out, 25% is typically paid tax-free. There are some instances where the amount may be larger, but in most cases it's 25%. And the balance that you draw out will be treated as income that's taxable, and that is going to be taxable against whatever your marginal rate of personal income tax is. Now there's one thing down the bottom there, and that is subject to the lifetime allowance. And just very quickly, the lifetime allowance currently sits at £1.25 million. So if you have a pension fund that is above that limit, these tax advantageous rules only apply for the first £1.25 million. Anything above that has a different tax regime apply. And if anybody is in the room that's got any form of protected lifetime allowance, then it may be that you have the old limits of 1.5 million or 1.8 million. Okay. Why did the government do it? Cynics have suggested it's something to do with the election. But in fact, if you actually look at the numbers, it was a really, in my opinion, a really clever piece of fiscal planning, because at the moment we've got all this money tied up in pensions and the government's tax take on it is relatively modest. Whereas of course, if you take it out of that pension, you may well pay income tax if you take out income. And what most people do when they take money out of pensions is spend it, which means you may pay VAT. So as such, it was a very clever way of trying to get accelerated tax payments. Yeah? And these are the forecasts that the government came out with at the time. Initially, the Labour Party's reaction wasn't actually that strong immediately after, but by the following day, I think it's true to say they were broadly in support of the measures, because it basically gives people more choice. So it gives fabulous opportunities, and for people such as Tony and his colleagues and myself, it offers fabulous tax planning opportunities. And so we're going to do some examples here. Now, the reason I've called these examples targeted flexible drawdown is because the type of income strategy we're talking about is what we know as flexible drawdown in the industry. And the reason I've used targeted is I'm not trying to show here that you can take all your money out in one go. We've got some slides on that in a moment. What I'm trying to show here is how you can use the new rules to advantage you rather than the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So the first example is the zero-rated income taxpayer. And in this example, we've got Beth and Bob. They are both 60 in April 2015 when they will stop work. They have got £1 million in a nest egg, and they have a target spendable income, which is a sort of language we would use when we sit down and talk to them, of £40,000. So the absolute minimum after-tax income they need to live is £40,000. Yeah? They've already had the tax-free cash from the pension because they wanted to pay off their mortgage, but they haven't taken any income so far. Yeah? And their £1 million is made up as follows. I appreciate the numbers are very simplistic, but it helps the example. We do come across clients with this type of setup quite regularly. So they've both got £200,000 in pensions. They've got £125,000 each in a fund portfolio, what we would call a general investment account. They've got £100,000 each in cash ISAs, and they've got £75,000 each in stocks and shares ISAs, or NISAs as they're called. Do the new rules help? Well, they do, because going forward, the clients can choose the income they want to take to fit in with their tax circumstances as well as their spending needs. So on this particular example, Beth and Bob will be advised to both take out £10,600 from their pension as income, which matches the personal allowance, which means they'll get that income tax-free. Yeah. The fund portfolio is put in suitable funds that yield 4% per annum. Cash ISAs are placed in a 1-year fixed-term deposit paying 1.7 each. The stocks and shares ISAs put in suitable funds yielding 4% per annum rather. Okay. Pension income, £10,600, matches the personal allowance. From April, you'll be able to take up to £5,000 out in savings income and pay reduced tax as well. ISAs total income over £40,000. Second example, the 1% taxpayer, and this is Jane. She's got no income, but she's got an old pension plan, and we come across clients like this all the time who've got old funds left from 20, 25 years ago maybe. It was switched into cash in 2008, and the fund is worth just over £75,000. She hasn't thought about how to use her pension, but her husband mentions the fact that he wants annuities to be better. And interestingly enough, they've got an interest-only mortgage that's fixed until 2020. Do the new rules offer an alternative? And this is quite a clever piece of planning, because if Jane waits until 2020 to take the money out, she takes it all out in one go. Once she's gone past the tax-free cash sum and her personal allowance, she will pay income tax on the balance. So because we've got enough time to plan ahead here, we will take money out of Jane's pension and feed it into an ISA. And the new ISA limits are 15,000. And the way it breaks down here is we draw down just under 15,000 a year, some of it tax-free cash, some of it personal allowance. The taxable income element is very small. We put it all into an ISA, and we keep doing that process so that over the 5 years, Jane's fund is depleted, but we have got money in an ISA, and in 2020, when the mortgage has got to be paid off, all that money is tax-free. If she wants to pay off the mortgage using other capital, it's also tax-free as income. Yeah. So it's a good example of how you can convert paid-up pension funds into more tax-efficient vehicles in the context of income. And then the third, this is an actual client of ours, although the names have been changed. Okay, so this is the 10% taxpayer. We've got Peter and Petra, and they're due to retire in April. They run a family business, and their children will take over the day-to-day running when they retire. This next point we come across all the time. They don't want to take dividends from the business anymore. They want to leave the money in the pot for the children. But they need income. They need £6,000 a month to live on. That's £6,000 net. Peter's got £800,000 in his pension, and Petra's got £400,000. Do the new rules help? They sure do, because again, we can target the income around tax planning strategies. So for each of them, we draw £10,000 out as tax-free cash. We draw £10,600 as tax-free income using the personal allowance, and the balance of the money is taxable at 20%. We've given them a total net income of £7,240, and the tax paid is just under 10%. Now, that example there wouldn't be possible for Petra if you look at the rules that are currently in place, because the current levels of income are capped. So you can't play those sort of clever games as well as you can post-April. Now, I think one of the interesting things is when all this came out, the thing that caught all the headlines was the pension minister, Steve Webb, said that he didn't mind people blowing all their pension pots if they wanted to go and buy a Lamborghini. And sure enough, that gave rise to Lamborghini Man. And in fact, I had a meeting with a client this morning, and when we talked about the new rules, before I got into the first sentence, she said, "Oh, you're going to tell me about Lamborghini Man." So it's obviously struck a chord. And I guess there is some concern that people will make bad decisions and they'll blow their whole pension pot. And so there we go. That's a picture of Tony many years ago, isn't it, Tim? Okay, so Steve's big in politics. He's a top-rate taxpayer. He's got a pension fund worth £500,000. He's 55, quite fortunately for our example, on the 6th of April. And he is the original Lamborghini Man, because if he wants to, under the new rules, he can take all his fund out in one go. That rather nice Lamborghini there is priced, as of yesterday, according to the garage, at £325,560. So basically he draws the whole lot down, pays a huge lump of tax on £375,000 of it, and it nets down sufficiently for him to be able to buy his dream car and, if you like, put a few pounds worth of petrol in the tank. As it happens, if people get the correct advice, professional advice, I don't think many people will make that mistake. If they don't want advice, they can pick up this new guidance guarantee that the government have given, which is impartial, and that will be offered by Citizens Advice if people want to sit down with them, and it will be offered as telephone through the Pension Advisory Service. Initially that was termed advice, it's now being termed guidance. There is a big difference between the two. And I guess the key point, if anyone in this room is thinking about how they access their pension funds, is those are the type of factors that we would consider before going anywhere. Yeah? What income do you need now and in the future? What existing assets have you got? What debts have you got? How important is the pension fund in your total assets? I can picture the form we fill in with clients when we first meet them on this type of thing. And one of the most fundamental points is your pension fund a large priority in terms of your total wealth? Yeah? Risk outlook, capacity for loss, lots of objectives questions, needs for cash. Health is a very important point, although we'll cover that off in a moment. So there are lots of issues that you would need to consider. Okay, a few more issues that perhaps you might want to also watch out for. And the obvious one is that the value of your pot, if you start taking money out of it, will erode because either your returns are too weak or you expect to get too much out. Yeah? That means that you will need to get involved in a structured monitoring process at least once a year, potentially more often. My concern is that if people try and go it alone, and in fact if people talk to the advisory community, they will end up using some very interesting and glossy looking cash flow modelling tools which allow you to select what you think a level of income will be safe for you to maintain capital. But if you think of doing that, and you can look online and you can see them yourself, and if you wanted you could have a go at trying to manage your own income expectations. I guess my main concern is the fact that most of the cash flow tools are very simple in so much as you put in an assumed rate of annual return and they just take that as a linear growth rate. Well, the point that one of my colleagues makes on this slide here is how often have we thought of investment markets operating in a linear way? If we look at the FTSE over the last 20 years, that is anything but linear. And that can have impacts on either the positive or the negative, because volatility and randomness in the market could actually help you out. If you set up one of these things and you get growth that's above the average line, you will find that your income will probably last longer because you got an early booster. The issue is if you rely on these cash flow modelling tools as your sole source of deciding a healthy level of income, and then you get what's called a negative sequence of returns, so for example maybe 2 or 3 years of losses, then you've got a real issue because you're drawing income from a pot that's already diminished in value. And in fact, we didn't put the numbers up there because we decided you wouldn't be able to read them because they're so small. But we did a spreadsheet, and it's quite staggering how quickly on the second example your money runs out compared to the first example. So all I would say is, if you're thinking of drawing money out, just be a little bit careful how you do it. Okay, next issue. Anybody that wants to fund into pensions, the annual limit that can go in as a contribution, whether it's a personal contribution or from your employer, in total is £40,000. From April, if you've entered into a flexible drawdown arrangement and you have taken any income at all, even if it's only £1, and you subsequently wanted to try and build up further pension, that cap is restricted to £10,000, and that could be a problem. And we've done a quick example here of where I think it could have a real issue, and that's where people are in company pensions with healthy levels of contribution. So in this case, Jim's 57 and he's progressed well with his employer and he's a senior manager. As a result, he's got a very nice pension fund with the company, and the employer puts in £20,000 a year into a pension for him. August 2015, Jim's read in the papers about these wonderful new flexible rules, and what's more, he's got an old personal pension going back 20, 30 years, and he decides to cash it in. If you do the numbers, it works out that he'll get £35,000 after tax. That's great. Unfortunately, he has drawn down income under the flexible drawdown regime, and as a result, going forward, he's just cost himself £10,000 a year in employer pension contribution. Yeah? So as a result, if there's anybody in this room that's already in drawdown, what's called capped drawdown, don't automatically on the 6th of April think you have to jump into flexible drawdown, because it could have consequences. And for those people that are moving into drawdown from the first time on the 6th of April or later, where flexible will be your only choice, you just need to think about your future funding before you take money out. And just one point there, whereas traditionally people viewed retirement as we build up the fund, we accumulate, and then we draw against it, what we call the decumulation phase. Because of the new rules, we're not sure that will carry on. We think people may well start treating their pension funds as bank accounts. I'll take some out today because I need the money. I can always put money back in up to the lifetime allowance. Just need to be careful how you do it because of this new restriction. Another thought, there are tens of thousands of people walking around with pension plans that have a lifestyling investment choice, which was a great idea, and it probably is still a great idea for many. And that is that over the last 5 or 10 years typically to retirement, maybe even as long as 15 years, your funds are automatically switched from higher risk to lower risk so that you don't have nasty surprises when you reach retirement. Typically the money is moved into gilts, which fits in very well because when you buy an annuity, you are effectively buying into a long-term gilt. Yeah? The only slight issue with that is, of course, if you go down flexible drawdown as a mechanism rather than buying an annuity, you really need to have some type of potential investment return there to maintain your capital spending power. So maybe lifestyling doesn't really work. And in fact, the note down here, not only if you are a plan holder, but if you are a workplace pension scheme manager, if you are an employer and you've had to choose a default fund, for example, you might need to go back and just check because some of those default options will have lifestyling automatically built in. Okay, this just one or two more points that came out of the budget last year as proposals and suddenly they've been firmed up. So at the moment, the earliest that someone can access their pension is 55. But what they have said is they're now going to link it to 10 years of the state retirement age, which means if you get to 55 before 2028, it's not really an issue. From 2028 onwards, when the state pension age goes up to 67, your earliest access point will be 57. Yeah? And then the second issue, if you have any money in a final salary pension or a defined benefit pension, and you were thinking about transferring it into a defined contribution scheme because of these wonderful new options, not an issue unless you happen to be in the public sector, and the government is banning transfers from the public sector schemes from April of this year. And in all fairness, the mathematics stack up. Public sector schemes are largely unfunded. There is no money there. You and I in our taxes pay for the pensions that are paid out. And if you imagine a sudden rush of people wanting to transfer all their money out because of these wonderful new flexible rules, all of a sudden they've got a big hole in their finances because they're having to pay out transfer values when they haven't got the money accounted for. So there is a very good reason why that ban is being put in place. Just one thing on that, by the way, if you've got any type of final salary pension, you need to take advice and look very carefully at what guarantees you're tearing up to get the benefit of this flexible drawdown approach.